Welcome to the Coach's Table podcast, where coaches come to grow personally and professionally through real-world application and online education. What is going on, everybody? Happy Friday. It is a beautiful Friday. It's July, and oh man, time is moving. It's crazy how fast the weeks get going, and you look back and you're like, holy cow, Friday's here, and now it's gone. This week is gone, and now we're in July, and now we're in August. Oh crap, school's starting. It's crazy how fast it all works, but it's also amazing at that time too. When you're doing fun things every day, the days just move on you, and so that's great. But guys, today's episode I'm actually very excited about because it's going to be slightly different than the past ones. Similar concept, but we're bringing on our first technology company, which I'm super excited about. I've been using their products for a little bit now, and have really enjoyed it. And so we're bringing them on today to give you more insight, not only on what they do, but the technology as a whole and why you should be utilizing it with your athletes. Super excited for that today. But before I introduce the guest and the company, guys, we're growing rapidly, which is amazing. Do me a huge favor, share the show. We work purely on value exchange. If we provide you any value, whether it's making you laugh, whether that's entertaining you, whether that's or educating you, or making you think, damn, I should really implement that. Oh man, that's a good point. If we get you thinking, do us a huge favor, share the show. Okay, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple. It takes 10 seconds for you to share the show. If you are watching on YouTube, because we drop the full-length episodes on YouTube, it takes 10 seconds to hit the subscribe button and watch the rest of the show, and then to leave a comment. Okay, that's my ask of you. Do that for every single episode you get value out of, because I do the best to bring the best people on for y'all, so to help educate you. If you could do me a solid, share the show. So without further ado, I have Mr. Luke Martin with the company Vitruve here to talk about VBT. What's going on, man?
Not too much. Appreciate the intro there, and yeah, happy to be here. Appreciate you having us on.
This episode is sponsored by TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr is the #1 performance platform for strength coaches around the world. Their software provides coaches with an elevated experience when it comes to program development, data tracking, and staying connected with athletes and clients. Coaches also have access to consultations with TeamBuildr's in-house sports scientists to help them manage and analyze data. Head to teambuildr.com and sign up with promo code TABLE to start your 30-day free trial. That's TeamBuildr, TeamBuildr.com with promo code TABLE to start your free 30-day trial. Oh man, thank y'all. I'm excited. Man, it's great. I've been using you guys for about a month or so now, a couple months probably, and it's been really good so far. So, let's just kind of kick it off, man. For the people that don't know what VBT is, and that's velocity-based training for those of y'all. If you're a strength coach, if you're an athlete, if you're a sport coach, whatever the case may be, kind of Luke, give us a little bit like, what is velocity-based training, and then why is it important to coaches, athletes, teams, individuals?
Yeah, absolutely. So velocity-based training, I think there's a, I've used this to address a common misconception, because I think there is a lot of misconception out there about VBT. And I hope we can kind of get through some of that today. It's not only speed-based training. I think, traditional training is what I would call percentage-based training. A lot of coaches are prescribing based off percentage. VBT is prescribing based off velocity instead of percentage. So it's velocity-based training instead of percentage-based training. Yeah. So it doesn't always have to mean that you're moving the bar super fast, doing these crazy speed workouts or things like that. It's just giving you objective data on how fast you're moving the bar, no matter if that's heavy, slow, or light, fast training. It's being able to kind of quantify where you're at and look at that data to make decisions in your training, same as you would with, sprint-based training, timing things, being able to get feedback on jump training, things like that. It's the same idea with your barbell or other workouts in the weight room, just giving you that objective data to make decisions.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And so I'll tell you, when I started using VBT, let's see, what are we, 2023 right now? Probably 3-4 years ago now.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's been great. I've used everything under the sun from different companies and everything. So whether different universities I'm at, they had, but I'll tell you, once I started using any sort of EBT, my training intent and my, I'm going to say desire to train, in all honesty,
Yeah.
goes way up. Like
Oh, it's huge. Yeah.
now when I don't have a unit, I'm like, I don't even want to train today. Like
Yeah. What's the
I,
point? I can't even tell
yeah,
what I'm doing.
no, I mean, yes and no, right? But it's
Yeah,
like,
but
and maybe this is a fault on me, but I've gotten so used to programming based off VBT that I mean, I write percentage based programs, but I'd rather write velocity based programs, in all
yeah,
honesty. Do you guys
100%.
kind of see the same thing with coaches that you work with teams that you work with?
Definitely. I mean, there's so many different uses and ways that you can kind of implement it. And the biggest thing that you touched on there is intent. That's the number one thing I tell coaches with VBT is
Yeah.
if nothing else, just look at the number and tell the kid to beat the number on the next rep or the next set. Like, even if you don't know what those numbers mean, just say that they mean the higher the better. And it's going to drive your intent through the roof. I mean,
Sure.
and seriously, I mean, that's,
Sure.
we have coaches who kind of struggle to get buy-in from their head coaches. And I say, bring it, have one group who has it and tell them that, have another group who doesn't, have the coach watch those two groups and he can tell
Mm,
you after the difference. And you say, the only difference between the groups is that little black box on the floor. That's the whole thing that drove that intent of that group that much higher. And I mean,
yeah.
that's just a simple, quick, again, getting started with it. If you don't know anything about it, start with that and then look at the data afterwards and kind of make decisions with it. And yeah, I mean, the other side of that is the auto regulation of it that you
Yeah.
started to mention there of,
Yeah.
your percentage based training versus the velocity, and kind of we call it velocity zones. So instead of
Sure.
putting you at 75%, we want you between X and Y speeds. And, we kind of know that correlates with 75%, but today you're kind of banged up. You played the whole game yesterday, so it's moving slower. It's going to tell us to drop your weight. Your 75% that day is down here, or we're getting stronger. We know that without having to test you. We know that because you're moving the bar faster. And so hey,
Yeah.
today we can gas you a little bit, put a little more weight on there. So those are really the biggest uses that we see is driving that intent and then having that auto regulation piece of kind of meeting you where you're at that day and being able to adjust your training on the fly.
Yeah, so stay on that for a second because
Mm-hmm.
we talk about velocity zones, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think everybody is always interested to see what they correlate with. If you could run us through, from our velocity zones, where are we at? What is available to us? Let me ask that question from a zone standpoint. And then what does each zone typically correlate with?
Yeah, so I think you got to be a little bit careful with this because it's going to
Sure.
depend on your population and your exercise quite a bit. I
Mhm.
think there's a lot out there currently kind of on the internet that just has this one force spectrum or velocity spectrum, if you want to call it
Yeah.
that says when you're at 1 meter per second, you're working on power. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
okay, that's maybe different for an Olympic weightlifter versus your high school sophomore girl volleyball player, right? And it
Right.
also depends
Right.
what exercise we're doing. You can move,
Mm.
you know, a power clean a heck of a lot faster than you can move a deadlift. So it's just going to
Sure.
depend. So,
Sure.
but I say that to say there are resources out there that show you those things. Go past the first result on Google that gives you the one spectrum and go find that research that
Yeah.
dives into each exercise and also conduct your own research. Use what's out there. Say, okay, we want 65% to move at this speed today. And then at the end of the day, we export the data, which our app is great at being able to give you all that in one spot. And look what that is telling you. Okay, we expected everybody to be around 0.65. Really, everybody was closer to 0.5. Maybe that's more what we're shooting for next time when we
Sure.
want that percentage. So you have to be able to adjust it there, but the data allows you to do that, right? So much
Right.
more than the coach's eye that everybody, we don't need this. I got the coach's eye. I've been coaching for
Yeah.
25 years, coach. You can't
Yeah.
tell me anything I don't already know. Well, yeah,
Right.
no,
Right.
you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
maybe that's true. Maybe you're the best coach out there, and you got this great coach's eye, but you can't watch everybody at once. So that's the other beautiful side of this is it can be your coach's eye on all 20 racks at once, because I know you don't have the coach's eyes in the back of your head too. So that's the other side of it as well. But to go back to what you originally said, I mean, the zones, I mean, kind of what's out there and what you'll see for each exercise is, the speed strength zone, the power zone, the strength speed zone, then like the max strength zone. And so depending on kind of, what qualities you want to work on. And again, they correlate to percentages as well. What people are a lot more comfortable with generally, you can know generally we do this percentage at this time of year and kind of just correlate that down to that speed. But again, just being careful that which exercise you're using for that and where you want to be. And again, going back to kind of the coach's eye thing, don't get rid of that either, because if you, set up everything and just the internet said we need to be at 1 meter per second, and, you get to there and it doesn't look like what you want it to be, you still got to be able to adjust the other way. It doesn't do your whole job for you. Right. So
that's so true.
Use both sides of it to kind of inform your training.
Yeah. I look at it as more of a confirmation component of it, rather than, oh, cool, we got VBT hooked up, I don't need a coach. Like, no. Like, you still need a coach. Like, you still need to be watching. You still need to be driving intent. You still need to be, encouraging and giving technical coaching cues, right? You're not just going to throw a VBT up, or hook it up, I should say, and then say, okay, cool, good luck, right? Like, no, you're still doing coaching. You're just utilizing numbers to help you either confirm, justify, or make adjustments for whatever training session that may be.
100%. In the technical side, I'm sorry to kind of interrupt you there, but that's a huge part of it that I see too, because that can be seen as a downside of VBT, is because as these kids get smarter, which they will, there are ways that you can game VBT to lighten your loads for the day by move it a little slower. I'm not going to have to do as much weight. Or if I do a half range of motion, I can move it faster, so I can, be looking like I'm superstar if we're doing leaderboards or something. So you still have to keep an eye on these kids, and it doesn't solve all your problems and doesn't have eyes. It just reads speeds. It's a very simple technology. You still have to absolutely do the coaching with it on there.
Yeah. Or like with squatting, what you see a lot with you see this a lot with squatting and like deadlifting, whether it's straight bar or trap bar. Like if I'm squatting, I have the bar on my back. Like at the top, when I come up to the top, I can give that
little extra
push with the upper body, and then my speed's gonna read faster, right? Or I come up on my toes or whatever. Same thing with like a deadlift, whether it's trap bar, straight bar. You can give a little extra shrug at the top, and that typically may increase or it might decrease. I don't know, right? But you there are ways to cheat it, of course. Just
don't
like
give
there's
them all
ways
the secrets here now in one spot now,
Yeah, just like there's ways to cheat. Yeah, I mean, you can cheat percentage-based programming as well, right? And regardless of what people say, like you can totally do it. So let me kind of talk to me about Vitruve. What is Vitruve? How does it work? Kind of explain to everybody what are the components of it and how does it all kind of work together?
Yeah, so ours is what's called a linear position transducer. I've got one sitting here, so I can give you a little show and tell as well. So it's a linear position transducer, which means it has the string in the strap. So it's your more old school, Tendo that's been around forever. Some of the other ones that are out there, a lot of people are familiar with this type of technology. And so that string, kind of what it gives you, everything's going to have its positives and negatives, right? But with a string, you're not gonna miss any reps. When you pull on the string, it tells you how fast you move the string. So it's pretty straightforward on that side of things. And then any LPT is kind of considered the gold standard of these type of VBT devices in terms of accuracy and precision. Again, like I said, when you pull it, it tells you how fast you pulled it and gives you a pretty consistent reading on that side of things. So that's the nice side of it. Ours is magnetic on the bottom. So when you're using it, if you're doing something in the rack, you can magnet it to the rack itself. A nice part of that I've been doing lately is you can actually magnet it if you're in a full rack to the top of the rack, and then you let it know that it's inverted. There's a setting on there that it knows that it's upside down. So it gives you your readings as you're coming up. It knows which part is concentric, keeps it off the floor so kids aren't stepping on it, getting tangled in it. And you don't have to take it off when you're changing weights and things like that. So that can be a really great way to use it in the rack. If you're outside the rack, obviously you got to find something to kind of put it on the floor. 5-pound plate works great. Just magnet it on there. If you got a metal plate, rubber one, just, rubber band it on there. And then that makes it really mobile, wherever you want to put it on the floor. If you're doing something where you can kind of keep it in the middle of the bar, that's great. If you need to put it on the outside, that works too. Whatever works best for what you're doing. Obviously protecting it as much as you can. So that's really the hardware side of things. And then the software is our Vitruve Teams app. So that allows each athlete to have their own profile on the app. So it's going to, store all their data. You can go back, export that data. It links with some program builders as well. So it can kind of automatically sync depending on what you're working with. And so, track that historical data, allows you to do live updating leaderboards. You can create custom exercises, have as many athletes as you want on there. So kind of a one-stop shop to collect that data there that you need, and then do with it what you will. However you want to look at it, track it over time, create reports that send to sport coaches, things like that. Allows you to do all those things pretty easily in there. So that's the nice side of that software.
Absolutely. And for our audience who's typically team based, how do y'all see the best way to implement Vitruve or VBT in a team setting?
Yeah. So first thing I'll say is that, that a lot of coaches, when you tell them there's all the athlete profiles and they got to interact with the app, they're like, oh man, that's going to take so much time. That's a waste of time. We only have 30 minutes, coach. I don't have time for that. We're trying to get through 5 blocks of training in 30 minutes. Like, I don't got time for these kids to play with the app. And what I always say that is, like, you cannot convince me that the data isn't worth it. And it goes back to what I said initially. Even if it's just the number and just playing beat the number, who can make the high score, and maybe you don't even look at the data after, that's worth it to me. And when you see the intent that it drives, like we said earlier, it's 100% worth it. Yeah. But I will say also that having those athlete profiles and collecting individual data is what's going to separate you from the pack. Okay. So it's worth it to have that, to be able to look at a kid's data over time. Like I said, generate the reports for the coaches. That is just invaluable information that you can have. So it doesn't take as much time as you think. Is the other side of it. Introduce it before you need it. Get the kids used to it. In a week or two, the kids will know how to use it better than you do. It's first day, they might look at it funny and not really understand what's going on. But if you educate yourself first, help them kind of troubleshoot. Once they get through a few problems, a couple sessions with it, they'll be educating you on how to use it, showing you new features, and it gamifies training. These kids love working on apps and playing games and whatever it may be. So it after you get through that initial honeymoon phase and setup, it's really not that bad. So I think the best part of our software, and getting back to your initial question here, is that it makes it really easy for multiple athletes to train at once. So all your athletes are signed in one spot across the top of the iPad. As many as you want can be signed in all at once. So you could have every kid signed in to every iPad. They could do a set at this station, walk over to station 5, talk to Jimmy and do a set, whatever. That's not how I would do it, but more power to you.
But let's be honest, that's how it goes.
It does happen that way.
That's how that goes. Let's be honest.
But at least you're getting data.
You're like, yo, how did he end up over here? Like, get back over here to your rack. And he's like,
you're on rack 1. I didn't know.
Yeah,
you've been on the same rack for 4 years, Jimmy. What are you talking about?
Bro, that's so true. It's so true. Like, come on, man. It's like, sorry, I was just talking to him. It's like, no. Like, man, that shit happens so often.
Yeah, exactly. But we planned for it, so we got you covered. Yeah. So, so just a touch of a button to switch athletes. Set it up, have it ready to roll. All your athletes signed in there. You can separate them into teams or rack groups ahead of time to make it easy. And then, like I said, touch of a button between athletes. They can change their weight, change their exercise, all from one screen without having to touch too many times. That's like the number one thing on our developers' mind, is the least amount of interaction with this app to give you what you need. Gotcha. It's been as streamlined as much as possible. If anybody using it has any better ideas, we're open to those too. But I think we've done a really good job, and our guys are really open to that feedback. And I think that's what makes us kind of separate a little bit is, we'll get feedback from a coach. Hey, I thought of this really cool feature, or way this could be altered a little bit. And, we'll have it live in the app a week later. So, our guys do a really good job of that. And we're always working to get better with that and all sides of things.
Absolutely. And from my experience standpoint, it's simple to utilize. And I think for most people that have utilized any sort of VBT, there's some that are more complex. There's some that are, very simple. And then there's some and I like the Tendo units. The problem is with the Tendo units is you don't actually really get to capture that data, besides them writing it down and then you going back into your office and manually punching it in and all this other stuff, which is fine. It just takes so much time. You know what I'm saying? Like that. Why are we going to make extra work for us when we could just utilize technology to capture that data for us and go from there? Yeah. And so I've enjoyed it so far. It's been really easy to see. It's been really easy to utilize, whether it's been myself just training or two other guys that I train with, getting the feel of it just like we should before we do anything with our athletes, obviously. But it's been really simple. It's been really easy. Visualizing it on an iPad makes it much, much easier than visualizing it on a phone. But that's just, I think most people already do that anyways. If they're doing any sort of VBT standpoint, you throw your iPad up there and you can get your readout and it's much, much easier. I think that's a huge component of it. So, okay, when we're talking to coaches about how often they should utilize VBT or any sort of that component, what is your guys' kind of recommendation or what you guys have seen best that works better? Maybe some coaches only use it for particular exercises. Some may use it on certain days. What have you guys seen working with a multitude of teams, coaches that has been successful with it?
Yeah. I think it goes back to a few things I've said, before is, it's not just for speed training. It's not just when you're doing your in-season speed, fast stuff or peaking or whatever. But it's just going to depend. And also kind of setting it up and using it before you need it, before you actually want that data and want to make sure it's good data. You want the athletes to be familiar with the app, how to record, what if they screw something up, how to kind of correct errors and things like that. But to me, there's no wrong time to use it. And I know that's kind of sounds crazy and it's going to be a distraction if we use it every day, but we have coaches who every time they're in the weight room, they are utilizing it because it's the data. There's it may not necessarily drive their training that day. They might not do anything that's velocity zone based or really interacting with the app, but they still just want the numbers of what their kids that day did that day. Hey, we're working at this percentage, but when you go, just strap this on. And I just want to see what it looks like. And again, it drives that intent always. So it's great there. But I think most of the, I'd say exercise wise, we see most people do one or two exercises a day. Generally, your main exercises, your power exercises at the beginning of the day. If you're doing something like that, that's, barbell or trap bar based. If you're doing med ball work or something, then that's probably, you're not going to want to strap it to kids' arms or whatever too much. We see that a little bit, but that's not really what it's designed for. And then, your big strength movement, anything with the barbell, trap bar, again, those are going to be kind of your main rocks. Not getting carried away with it to do, even if you're using the barbell for your auxiliary exercises, that's not, it's quick to use, but it certainly adds a couple seconds here and there. And if you're doing, switching exercises, switching implements with it, getting it set up for this exercise after you did that exercise, it's going to add a little bit to it. And I get it. I made a joke about it earlier, but you are on a schedule and a time crunch most times you're in the weight room. So I get that, not trying to overdo it and add more than you need to. But, I think, like I said, getting that data is so valuable, even if you're going heavy. Something that we talked to coaches recently at the NHSSCA, the high school conference. They had a VBT talk, and I'll credit Maddie Harrelson. It has a great way that they use it, that it doesn't take up any time for them. but it gives them insight into the training. Is they've got a velocity zone set for that day based off where they're at percentage, like I've been saying, but they don't even really tailor their training mid-session. If a kid's not hitting their speeds, they don't see that until after the session. They're not walking around making sure you're here and there and switch your weight. You stay with it, do the best you can, but then we're looking at the data afterwards. And if a kid's, below on every rep, then it raises a red flag for us. So we can go talk to the kid, see what's going on. Hey, is something going on physically, mentally? Why is this the case? And same thing on the other side. If your speeds are off the chart, okay, we need to adjust kind of your training max. So that's a really minimally invasive way to do it. They're doing that at high percentages. And the other side of that is also a velocity cutoffs that she utilizes that were great. Where, hey, this is your minimum speed. Maybe we don't have a velocity zone. We just hook it on and say, hey, if the bar ever goes below this speed, you're done. So if we're doing APRE or like burnout sets or something, kind of at the end of our training, it's just a safety measure. It's, I think hers were like 0.2 for bench and 0.3 for squat that she said, I've seen it after your rep goes below that, at about 98% of the time, your next one, you're going to hit the floor or you're going to be pinned underneath it. Yeah. So it's a great safety measure there too. Again, doesn't have to be fast training, can also be used on the heavy side of things.
I think it's also extremely beneficial on the heavy side of things. Like, whether you're doing doubles, singles, triples, whatever the case may be. And let's say you're doing a double, right? Let's call it a squat or a bench. I don't particularly care the exercise. You do the first one, and everybody's been there where either you're lifting or you're watching the athlete lift, and you're like, are you going to go for this next one? Like, are you sure about that? Like,
that first one was a grind, man.
Yeah, you're like, man, that was like 4 seconds. Are you sure? So then, like, you get a little closer to them, and you like, make sure that you're ready to spawn because you're like, I don't know if you're going to get this one, bro. Like, but what that does in that particular moment, like you're saying, is the velocity cutoff component of it. Is you're like, hey, look, like, kill it. That's it. You can utilize your coaching eye because we're all seeing it. We're like, is he really going for that? Is she? I don't know. And then you're like, hey, kill it. No. And then they're like, yeah, okay, got it. But
yeah. It gives them the power to do that by themselves. Like I said earlier, if you got if you're watching the kid do that, you can say, hey, like, stop. But if the other kid behind you is doing the same thing, if you have these steadfast rules of, hey, when this thing beeps, if you go below this speed, rack it. I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, do not go do another one. So having that guideline can be really helpful.
Absolutely. And there's a couple of features that you guys have that I really enjoy. And if you would kind of talk about them a little bit, but you have the zones that you can obviously, pick and change, which is great. But then you also have like an audio sound. If you're in and out of that zone, kind of talk to them about that. Like, what specific features, if we're doing specific zones, because I think that's where most people go with it, right? Hey, we're going to train in this zone 0.7 to 0.8 or 0.6 to 0.7 or whatever the case may be. Talk about the kind of the features of what you guys have to give both objective feedback and auditory feedback as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, you touched on it there. The velocity zones are great. You can, like you said, move them around, make them bigger, smaller. You could kind of disable one side of it to make it just a basement or a ceiling. Don't go above this speed, don't go below this speed, like I was saying there. And then the auditory feedback as well. So if you've got a zone set and you have that auditory turned on, anytime you're within that zone, it's going to read your speed to you. So I think you said 0.7 to 0.8. If you were in there, 0.75, it would read it out to you and let you know kind of where you're at while you're in that zone. If you drop below that zone, it would beep. And then same thing if you went above, but it would actually be a different tone of beep above versus below, so you would know where you're at. But beeping is normally a bad thing. You kind of know that you're not in the speed that you want to be in, no matter what that tone is.
Yeah.
The other setting that I'll mention is our fatigue setting. It's a similar idea, but you can basically set a certain percentage of fatigue that you want the athlete to stay within during their set, and that can be a great way to use it, especially for in-season training. Of, hey, I want you to put this load on here, and I want you to just do as many reps as you can until you hit a 10% fatigue. So they're just fresh, fast reps. Maybe they're jump squats, clean pulls, just regular squats, whatever. But hey, hit a couple of them, it's going to beep at you once you slow down past 10%, and then rack it. So just making sure that we're fresh and kind of setting the parameters of, we don't want you slowing down much during this set, or it gets kind of into that like APRE of, I want you to grind it, but then once it, drops this percentage, then we're done. So that's another way you can kind of use a different setting on there to do something similar and get some feedback with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find that to be very beneficial. Now, I know people are going to say, well, what if the music's really loud and I can't hear the beep and et cetera? Like, your athletes will hear the beep, I promise, especially when they're they're that close to an iPad. You're 3 feet away, whatever.
And if you got the iPad there, I mean, those reps are going to show up gray. So your reps in the zone are green. Anytime, whether you're above or below or hit that fatigue number, it's going to show up as a gray rep. And so you'll know either through the beep or visually you can see that it's, a failed rep.
Yeah, you failed big time, But, some coaches, like, they love to turn the music up and all that stuff. Yeah. So what's great about it, it's no different than when you're utilizing other tech, whether it's, timing gates, whether it's force decks, jump mats, whatever the case may be, right? You get that instantaneous objective feedback. And what I've also noticed with this for coaches that struggle having the spotter engaged as well is if you tell the spotter or the partner or partners that they're training with to read the numbers off, what you see, to what your point earlier was, you gamify training a little bit, but you also get them engaged. It's not just the athlete doing the exercise that's now engaged. It's also the partner or partners that are there at that particular rack or all racks that are now engaged. And they're reading 0.83, 0.87, 0.75, whatever the case may be. And they can help hold each other accountable from that standpoint or push each other, more. And I've noticed that tremendously. Like, everybody's engaged more, not just the individual doing the particular exercise.
Oh yeah, that's a huge part of it is the gamification of it and just the competition, whether it be competing against each other, talking smack of, you only got this many reps or it says your 1RM is this part of it. Cause that's something that I've kind of failed to mention here. And I think that is a big part of it is the 1RM estimation that it'll do as well, based on your weight and speed. It's got kind of algorithms in there where it'll spit out an estimated 1RM. And it's a ballpark. It's not perfect. Sure. Each athlete's going to have their own force velocity, and depending on what percentage you're at, it's going to do a better job estimating, but it gives you, again, a ballpark and, a way to kind of test every day without actually having to throw all that weight on your back. I think that's another, huge plus side of that is, we can have these ballpark numbers and these testing parameters without actually having to do that testing. So it's a lot safer without having to load you up like that. We don't have to spend a whole day in the weight room, everybody drinking 3 times as many pre-workout as they usually do, taking their shirts off. And, I enjoy that
smelling
stuff.
Smelling salts. Yeah, you can't forget those,
getting huge. And there's still a time and place for that. Maybe that's a different argument. Yeah. But I think especially in like the high school settings and things like that, it can be a really great kind of safety net, safety feature and way to, again, always be testing type of thing is a big part of it too.
So talk about that population real quick, because it always seems to be, okay, first of all, high school strength and conditioning is really good, right? It's gotten much, much better. Not that it was ever like terrible, but there's a much larger emphasis in pride. I mean, some of them are still really bad. And then some of college coaches are still really bad too. Let's not make that mistake at all, right? There's some college coaches that are just atrocious, and there's some high school coaches that will mock college coaches without question. But high school training, what we're seeing is high schools are investing more and more in strength conditioning, their facilities, particularly in the state of Texas, right, where their high schools are insane. But the point that I'm making here is, for people that are, the question always asks, hey, when should my son or daughter start training, right? And we're not here to answer that question, but what we're here to answer is, when should high schoolers utilize VBT? Should they, right? At what point do we find it beneficial? Have y'all seen, working with high schools and high school coaches, to kind of see that? Is it typically your older, juniors and seniors that are maybe more developed, have foundations underneath them? Are you seeing it more with all high school students?
Yeah.
Kind of where are you guys at with that?
Yeah, it's a complicated answer, right? It's there's
Yeah,
no, as is pretty much every strength and conditioning question.
sure.
But I think there's a couple of things that you could say that you should consider when
Sure.
kind of answering it. First would
Hmm.
be like, base level of strength and training age. Like, my kid's first day in the weight room, I don't think I would strap him into VBT, which, a lot of your freshmen, that's the case for a ton of them.
Yeah,
So, they've got to be able to move first and have a base level of strength to be able to control the weight, control their body, all those things that I think, any decently competent strength coach would tell you is kind of the base level of being able to train. So that's kind of
right.
the first check mark you gotta get to
Sure.
is movement quality, and then kind of a base level of strength. Exactly what that is, base level of strength, is a little more convoluted. I think
Sure.
Brian Mann, I don't know have the numbers on top of my head, but he kind of has a relative strength number that he has for his athletes to start using VBT. I could throw a guess out there of what it is, but I don't want to screw it
Yeah,
up. But you could look up his. I think he's answered that question before of kind of,
sure.
the force velocity curve doesn't really make a whole lot of sense until you get to be able to produce a certain amount of force, right? Like
Right. Right.
you've seen, a slow, out of shape kid can only move the bar so fast, whether it's
Yeah.
50% of their max or 100% of the max, they're going to stand up the same
It
speed no
moves
matter
at the same
what.
speed. Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. So
Yeah.
there's something to that, but that's kind of, again, I don't have the perfect answers to that.
Sure.
And then the other thing would be like a maturity level. You're introducing these, technology into it. They have to be mature enough to, not to be a distraction, for them not to be messing around, taking more time, using the iPads to take pictures of their buddies, or, high
Yeah.
school, you can get a wide range of maturity
Yeah.
levels in high school. So I think it's
Heck, you can
something
do
like,
that in college. You do that in
oh yeah,
college too.
oh,
Oh, come on.
probably
It's not
worse.
just, oh, yes, yes, yes. And all of this
Yeah.
holds true to the college level, right? Like
Yeah.
what you're saying
Yeah.
right now, it all holds
100%.
true to the college level.
That's
There's so
true.
many college kids that are freshmen, that are sophomores, and still juniors and seniors that, you're questioning, man, should I even put them on that? Are they going to take it seriously? Do they even understand training enough to understand why this is important? Or are
Mm-hmm.
they like, is the string always going to be at an angle? Or are they going to always mess it up? They're always not going to click their name. You know what I'm saying? Like there's
Yeah.
so many other things. It's like, if you're going to utilize it, this is not just for the high school, but this is both for college and high school, where you're like, man, like, is this a group that I trust enough to do so? That's a
Yeah.
huge question you got to
Yeah.
answer as well.
So the way I've always kind of looked at it, and I think a lot of coaches do, is that you got to earn it, right? With your maturity and with your strength. So hey, I want to do that. That looks awesome. Can I do that? Oh, maybe someday you got to get a little stronger first and show me that you're ready for it, and then you can do it. So generally that's, your upperclassmen, you're stronger, more experienced, mature lifters. And again,
Yeah.
like you said, same for college. But maybe you have, and that's not to say that no freshman can touch it. Maybe this
Right.
kid's dad was Mr. Olympia and he's been training since he was 9, and he's, whatever. But,
Right.
Just saying that you had to earn it kind of on that basis is a pretty good, whatever rules you kind of come up with, of you have to hit this base level of strength and show me that you're, mature enough to handle it. And then we can kind of start with it, because, again, I don't think there's necessarily a wrong age or anything.
Sure.
I mean, I guess we talked about, the maturity of it and things and strength, but
Yeah.
that's not to say there couldn't be someone who is ready for it at that age. And I think, as I've keep coming back to numbers on any type of training, and as long as the coach is ensuring that it's still quality training, is really
Right.
never going to be a bad thing, as long as the numbers are going to mean something because they have that base level of strength and that they're mature enough to be able to collect numbers that mean something.
Yeah. I think that's a very good way to describe it and put it. and how well they listen. I'm going to throw that in there too. I think that's a
Mhm.
huge component. How well they listen and take direction. If you got a group that struggles to listen and take direction, and you try and introduce them, and now they're gonna, I don't know what buttons what, and etc. Yeah, it could be a headache real fast, and you're just like, whoa,
Yeah.
like that's not. But if you have a group that listens and they take training seriously, and they're like, okay, cool, it makes sense, and then you can have a lot of fun with it. And I think that's where you really see results, and you're like, man, this is where it's at.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's where you really hang your hat, and you're like, okay, this is legit, right? So there's just things, if you're listening, there's things to take into consideration. There's things to variables to consider that only you can answer for your individual teams, individual athletes, coaches, groups, that you have to make a decision on, and go from there on it, right? And maybe you introduce it and then you pull it out and you're like, not yet, or whatever the case may be. You always have that option. Just because you have it doesn't mean you need to use it always, and it doesn't mean you can't pull it back when it's not working for them particularly, right? So that's
Yeah.
options for coaches. A lot of times I feel like they think like, I now introed it, they've used it, I can't take it out now. It's like, oh, you always have that option.
Yeah, yeah. Framing it as like a reward, that's, again, just like you have to earn it. Okay, hey, we couldn't handle that today. We're gonna have to do some work to get back to be able to use that, or
Yeah.
yeah. I think that makes tons of sense.
Yeah. Last couple questions here for you.
Yeah.
What particularly, with Vitruve, where y'all are at, what makes it really stand out against everybody else? And then what are the biggest lessons you've learned while working for the company, and that you've seen with Vitruve particularly?
Yeah. So, I mean, what makes us stand out, I think, is kind of the things that we come back to is kind of the reliability and accuracy of it. So it's a device that works. If you're going to collect all this data and drive decisions in your program with it, that data needs to be accurate data. You don't want missed reps, outliers. If you're trying to do a set of 5 and make a decision, and you missed one of the reps and one of the reps just doesn't make any sense, that data is now worthless. So we really, really focus on our product that delivering those accurate and precise data is a huge part of it. And then the ease of use of the app, I talked about it a little earlier. I've thumbed through a lot of the other apps and things like that, and I'm biased, certainly,
Sure.
but
Sure.
but we get a lot of feedback that ours is easy to use. In training, it delivers the data that you need, kind of gets rid of some of the extraneous stuff that maybe can be distracting at times. And then it's easy to get the data out of there and work with it on your computer, whatever you need to do with it. And it's just simple for the athletes to go through. And then the last thing would be affordability. Some of these other ones, I get it. Athletic budgets, especially for strength departments. Even in big schools, you think, oh, you guys have unlimited budget, and they're like, well, not in the strength.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are coming across, tight budgets, having cuts and things like that. And then obviously at the lower levels, it's always been that way. So, kind of the goal of creating this device of our founders was, they kind of came across VBT and wanted to implement it. And then they looked up the price of buying some of the technology, and they were like, well, I can't afford that. Nobody can afford that. So they wanted to make kind of the everyman's VBT was kind of how the company started. So, I think it's very affordably priced, compared to some of the other ones, and so it's trying to get it into the hands of more coaches to be able to make data driven decisions. Would be kind of the 3 things that I would point to that I think stand out. And then also, I guess I mentioned earlier too, would be like our customer support. I mean, that's kind of tooting my own horn a little bit because I'm a piece of that, but I try to be super responsive. Any feedback that I get, I'm elevating it to our engineers, our product design, developers, things like that. And like I mentioned earlier, they're really responsive and quick to make changes that they see are going to be beneficial to our customers. So that's been a huge part, and something that I guess is a pro. And also, kind of to answer your other question, is in this space is being nimble. I mean, it's kind of ever changing and developing. VBT isn't brand new, but it's getting a lot more popular, and coaches are using it in new ways. And developing new ideologies off of it. And hey, I want to be able to look at this data this way and compare it to that. And this is kind of how I'm using it. Could you make it easier to do that? So I think we've done a good job. And like I said, that's something that I've learned a lot is being able to pivot. Maybe pivot's not the right word, but just like I said, kind of be nimble and change what you're delivering at times, and being quick to kind of jump on the new, not the new wave, but new trends that you're seeing in it, I guess is a good way to say it. Has been a huge part of what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. The adjustments in the marketplace,
Yeah.
So cool. Last one for you, man.
Yeah.
Where do y'all see Vitruve or VBT? Let's go Vitruve first in the next 3, 5, 10 years. Where do you guys kind of see the future of that going? And then if you want to wrap that into the future of VBT as well, feel free. But where do y'all see y'all going in the next 3, 5-ish, 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a lot in the works on the software side, and then always on the hardware side, improving what we have. Looking into other technologies and whatever we find the best product to be in the marketplace, we want to be the ones that have it. So that's kind of the vision of the company is being the global leaders in VBT, whether that be the and to us, that's not just the hardware. That's the best software as well. So being able to give strength coaches all that they need to be able to run that, whether it be the programming side of things, it be the data collection, reports on that data. So that's really kind of, I'd say, where we're expanding this year and the next couple years is right now we do a great job delivering that data. It's kind of up to the coach to decipher that data and make those decisions. We are trying to get help, like I said, kind of hearing from coaches, getting more feedback, seeing what data they want to be able to visualize and generate reports off of. And, how do you want to use that data, and being able to help them do that is kind of I think the biggest next step for us and really all VBT. It seems like, the upper level, I won't say upper level, but the coaches who are more experienced with VBT, I guess, have kind of a good understanding of what the data is telling them and how to use it. But for a beginner coach, that can be really intimidating. I know for me, that was kind of the biggest thing is, okay, I've got all this data now. Like, I'm expected to be able to do something crazy, predict the future with it or something. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Like, now what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, now what? So being able to deliver that insight to coaches, give them a better idea of what the data is telling them, I think is kind of the biggest future undertaking for us.
Yeah, and I think you're seeing that with sports science right now, though, right? There's so many tech companies, which are amazing, and I think they're all great, and I think there's a lot of great stuff from them. But it's the common question of like, now what? What do I do with this? How do I know what I'm looking at? How do I know that this is going to impact performance? How do I know? It's those questions that I think everybody, is answering or attempting to answer in their own way. It's also, now we have sports scientists, which are amazing. And then, more experienced coaches, you typically kind of see some things, or you see like what's more important, things that you should be keeping your eye on, and rather than just noise, because there's a lot of noise when you utilize tech, and there's a lot of everything's tracking everything, and you can get so many different stuff, and you're like, holy cow, this can be overwhelming at times. But I think, I think it starts with the question first, right? What are you trying to answer? Okay, now what method are you going to implement to hopefully answer that question? And it's like you said earlier, doing your own research too. I think, each coach should do their own research on themselves, like N=1. And, if you're trying VBT, if you're trying Vitruve, if you're trying whatever, do it on yourself first, do it on yourself for a couple of weeks first, 6 weeks first, 8 weeks first, and then attempt to be like, okay, cool, does this make sense? Okay, cool. Now, like, if I was to think about this in the context with that in practices, and what does that look like? And things from that standpoint. I think there's so many coaches that can learn a lot, myself included, on that when you do it that way, especially for younger coaches, especially for people that, you're like, hey, man, like, I don't know anything about this. It's like, cool. Well, let's learn. You got to do it. So,
absolutely,
that's awesome. Where can people find Vitruve? How can they get in contact with y'all? And how can they test you guys' stuff out?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website starting off is vitruve.fit. All kinds of good resources on there. Obviously, the product is on there. And then if, contacting myself, I'm our U.S. sales executive. So if you're in the U.S. or anywhere that speaks English pretty much, and you're interested in the product, you can reach out to me. My email is l.martin@vitruve.fit. Would love to have a conversation with you, talk about solutions for where you're at and if it makes sense for you guys. We do product demos as well, where we can send you one to test out in your weight room. I know you have one right now.
Yep.
And so, yeah, there's nothing like, having it in your hands, like you said, testing it out, N=1 on yourself, run it on a few athletes, see how they interact with it is generally
Yep.
what I instruct coaches while they're doing that demo. And then, hopefully can make something work there. But yeah, that'd be the best places to find us.
I also think that's a huge advantage. When you're looking to show your administrators or the people with the money that are going to make the purchase, hey, this is what we're looking to invest in. It's the classic sales 101. You get the product in the people's hands, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I give you this water bottle and I'm going to sell you on this water bottle, Luke, the number one thing I'm going to do is put it in your hand,
Yep.
Because if you have it in your hand, you're probably going to buy it.
Ooh, yeah, this is nice.
Yeah. Oh, you like that, So for any of you coaches that are looking to be like, hey, man, like, I want it. I don't know how, whatever. Reach out, ask for a demo, because you can go into your administrator's office or whoever's office. Hey, look, this is how it works. Here's the app. I can show you how this works. Come into the weight room, or I can just show you right here. Let me pull the string. You see this reading. This is what's important to us, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
100%.
And then let them play with it and then put it in there. And here's what happens when you put it in the weight room. People start asking questions about it.
Yeah.
And when people start asking questions about it, that's a good thing. Hey, what is this? What does it do? How do I work it? Hey, how many are we getting? Is everybody going to have one? Who gets to utilize it? And then you're like, hey, everybody's asking about it. Hey, so
kids are
guys,
buzzing.
For those strength coaches that don't think they're salesmen, you're wrong. You are a salesman. You're a salesman to your athletes every day, and you're a salesman to your administrators, okay? There's a quick little sales lessons for y'all. But anyways, man, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you guys for hopping on and for your guys' help. I enjoy the product so far. I really do. It's been very easy to use. It's been very easy to implement. I've had extensive experience with VBTs, but it's been great to utilize. And I want to thank y'all for that. And I want to thank you guys for your time, man.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure, man. Really appreciate you having on here. Hope this is useful, at least a little bit, to your listeners. VBT is just a small piece of the puzzle, as you know, but I think we offer a great product that can be useful to a lot of coaches. So I hope, people who are interested will reach out. But yeah, this has been awesome. Again, appreciate you having us on, and we'll talk soon, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you, Luke. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Vitruve, for being on. I appreciate y'all. Guys, if you're listening, do a huge favor. Reach out to Luke. Get in contact with him. Okay, get yourself set up with a demo. Because you'll really enjoy it. If you're in a high school setting, if you're a collegiate setting, the budget is tight. Very, 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 very affordable, which is fantastic. A lot of great features for it, and some good things coming down the pipeline that we talked about here, and that Luke and I've had conversations on elsewhere as well. So that's great, and that's outstanding. So, guys, do us a huge favor. If you like the show, if you learned something, if you're like, man, you know what, I need to get that for my athletes. If you laughed with us, do us a huge favor. Share the show. It's the only way the show grows. Share this to a friend that you think can benefit from it. Somebody that you think, hey, man, this is something you need to look into. Something that's like, man, I had that when I did mine, or, yep, you're right. You're spot on with those athletes that don't take it seriously. So do us a huge favor, share the show. And until then, we'll catch you on the next one, and reach out to Luke and reach out to Vitruve, and you guys will enjoy working with them. Till then, guys, we'll catch you on the next one.